Hello, and welcome to Tracy Momi Reads. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite books. And this, oh my God, it is like nearly impossible to really narrow things down. On my birthday last year, I did a list of like my top 50 favorite books. And there's probably even more, but the 10 that I'm going to be highlighting are books that I could read again, that I would love to see like a documentary or movie made off of them. Books that, when people ask me for recommendations, these are books that I always recommend. So I'm going to be talking about those today. I'm going to do the first 5 today, and then I'll do the next 5 next week. And they're not in any particular order. I just couldn't bring myself to be like, okay, this is number 1, this is number 2. They are all like amazing books, and if you're looking for some recommendations, then this video is for you. Okay, so the first book is here on my Kindle. The other books I have hard copies, so I'm going to do the Kindle one first. The Timekeeper by Mitch Albom. The Timekeeper. I read this book years ago. I don't know if it's been 5 years maybe, but it's been a while, but it left like an indelible mark when I read it. The thing about this particular book, it's a fiction book, but like most of Mitch Albom's books, they're like fables, and there's always like this moral or this lesson or some overarching thing that you get from the book. And it's always, most of his books almost always deal with a spiritual undertone, thinking about the what comes next after this life, how we as humans spend our time in this life, and things like that. So the Timekeeper is basically the title kind of speaks to kind of what's going on in the book. There's a person or a deity that is in charge of time. And we learn how time, through his recollections, probably some historical accuracy, probably mostly fiction, but we learn how time became a construct and how we measure time, starting way back from when the sun would set and go up and how long that took. Somebody had to have counted that to be able for us today to say, oh, that's 12 hours, or that happens at 7 o'clock, or what have you. So there's a timekeeper. We go back to the Middle Ages, but then it jumps present day and it focuses on these 2 people, a younger girl and then an older man. The older man has lived, I don't know if he was like 70, 80, but he has so much more that he wants to do. He has accomplished so much. I think he's like a millionaire and has created all this stuff, but he's not ready to go. And he's kind of, at the end of his life. He's not ready to go. But then you have this young girl who, I want to say, she's anywhere from 16 to 20. I mean, she's really young. She's thinking, as most younger people do when, they face some type of adversity, that they're never going to be able to get over it. Life's not worth ending. I don't even want to be here anymore. So she wants her time to be up, and he wants more time. And it's kind of like how their worlds collide. So yeah, it was a really good book, and it helps you put a lot of things in perspective about how you spend your time and how you waste your time, and how you don't want to be at the end of your life looking for more time. So you should cherish it while you have it. So yeah, The Timekeeper. That was a really good read. So if you're interested in, those type of books, I recommend that one. The next one, again, in no particular order, Shake Down the Stars by Renee Swindle. Shake Down the Stars. I read this one a while ago too, and again, it's one of those books that stayed with me. Because sometimes you read books and they were really good books, but you kind of forget the story because it's probably recycled or familiar, or another author comes along with that same formula. But the books that I'm talking about today, they're kind of unique in the stories that the author told. So with Shake Down the Stars, the main character, her name is Piper Nelson. and she's kind of going through it. She lost her child, a young child, passed away, and she has turned to alcohol to cope. So she just is really finding it hard to move on after losing her daughter. And when she was younger, she used to really be into astrology, but not astronomy. I'm sorry, not astrology. Astrology is zodiac signs. I'm into astrology. But Piper was into astronomy, the skies and the galaxy and all of that. And the way that this author wrote about that whole thing, it was beautiful. And as a result, the way she talked about the stars and all of that, it was something I wanted to go stargazing, and I ended up doing that. That was something on my bucket list, and I ended up doing it. And it is an incredible sight to behold when you can go out of the city and go out and see the sky just lit up like diamonds. So and it's just a story of overcoming hardship, overcoming grief, and finding something worth living for. So Shake Down the Stars, that's a good one. Now, this book, I have been known to tell people it's my favorite book, like if I had to pick one. And it's called The Wake of the Wind by J. California Cooper. The Wake of the Wind. And I read this book back in the late 90s when I was a part of a book club. And when this book was suggested by one of our members, and it was, decided that we would read it, I was like, no, I don't want to read that, because it starts off like it takes place when the book opens during slavery, and then it goes through Reconstruction. So, I was like, I don't want to read books about slavery, and I still am not a fan. I will put that out there. During that time period, that era, I don't really care for movies, books, anything that depicts that, that awful time in American history. But this particular book, I think because at its core, at its heart, it was a love story, a story of overcoming, a story of making a way out of no way. I mean, it was almost like, the American dream actually happened for the two main characters, Lifey and Moore. And the thing that kind of drew me into the story is at the beginning of the story, Moore is bought, I don't know who was there first, if it was Lifey or if it was Moore, but they were forced together into a marriage by the people over the plantation or whatever. And they didn't even know each other. And the way that Moore, like from the beginning, how he gravitated towards Lifey and took care of her, and was like, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, this is just for pretense, we're doing this for these people, let's and they ended up becoming friends, and they ended up falling in love. And so then it goes through when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, and they start their life together and have kids and build a business. So there's a happily ever after, so to speak. And this is a whole fiction book, but it just goes to show you that, some stories really draw you in with, because the characters seem so real, they're written so realistically, or the imagery is so palpable. And I have not read this book. This is a book that I do want to reread. I have not read it since the 90s, and I have vivid recollections of what it's about. That's how good this book was. So, if you're interested in that type of thing, or you want to give it a try, The Wake of the Wind by J. California Cooper. Next, it seems like for a couple of years, like starting probably 2018 or so, I was reading a lot of memoirs. Initially, I was annoyed because I'm like, why are all these, young celebrities or people that aren't even midway to their lives writing memoirs or whatever? But a lot of it was just for inspiration, I guess, to tell your story while you still can. You're in your right mind, and just to inspire people, or people who may be fans of your work, or who maybe aspire to where you are. And one of the most compelling memoirs that I read was Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. Born a Crime, Trevor Noah. I like Trevor Noah anyway, and I fell in love with him even more after reading his memoir. And the title Born a Crime is actually, it alludes to him because he was born in South Africa during apartheid, and his mom's black and his dad's white, and it was illegal for there to be mixed race relationships. So him being born from that relationship in itself was a crime. So that's where the title comes from. If you are familiar with Trevor Noah, he is extremely clever, and just his mind, even though he's a comedian, he's just very smart and very in tune with politics in the world and how things work, and his book is no exception. I felt like, there was humor in here, there was some tragedy, but it was also a history lesson. It's just mind-boggling because I think he was born in 1984, 1986 or something like that. I was a teenager during that time in America, and it seemed like, we had moved past a lot. I mean, racial discrimination and all of that still is very much alive. But back in 86, here in the United States, I mean, it wasn't like it was in the 60s or previous, and for apartheid and all the stuff that was going on during that time to be happening in South Africa when I was a teenager, it just seems implausible, but it happened. And we got to be careful because sometimes history can repeat itself if we don't call to the carpet the powers that be and not let a lot of stuff go unchecked. So anyway, Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This is a really good book. And then the last one for today for this video is just looking at them, I started smiling. The name of this book is called The Book of Joy, and it is by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. This book is so highlighted. I have so many highlights and underlines and exclamation marks and stuff. Basically, what happened is I think it was the Dalai Lama's birthday. Yeah, it was his 80th birthday. And he spent 5 days with, look at this picture of the two of them on the back there. He spent 5 days with Desmond Tutu, and they just were talking about the concept of joy and, what it meant for both of them, both of them being later in their years and the lessons that they've learned in life. And it's a beautiful book. It is a beautiful book. So this isn't a fiction book. This is, actual account of the time that they spent together and the things that they've learned. And there's just one thing I've just happened to randomly turn to this in this book that I underline, and it says, when we see others as separate, they become a threat. When we see others as part of us, as a connected, as interdependent, then there is no challenge we cannot face together. So yeah, timely stuff, very timely, things that you can use as a guide in this life, even now with everything that's going on. I mean, I was reading another thing, but I'll end up reading this whole book to y'all. But this one, if you want to laugh, shed some tears, have some revelations and aha moments, and just kind of reassess how you think about yourself and how you think about the world at large, this is a good one to pick up, The Book of Joy. So yeah, so that's my, the first 5, again, in no particular order. I mean, they'll be like asking me, who my favorite kid is. I can't be talking about who my favorite book is. So just stay tuned for part 2 next week, and I'll have another 5 books to round out my top 10. Thank you for watching. If you've read any of the books, or if you have a book that you can narrow down to be your favorite, mention it in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe so that you can get all of the updates for upcoming videos. Thanks, and have a great day.